Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's Lunch and Learn. My name is Stephanie Letourneau. I am Wetlands Watch's Community Science and Outreach staff. I'm excited to talk about all things Catch the King today and our community science initiatives. Wetlands Watch's Flood Risk Project staff, Genevieve Gary, will be in the chat, helping with answering questions and keeping us moving and grooving. We're aiming to have time at the end to answer questions, but feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat as you have them. We will have time at the end for you to come off mute and be able to ask your questions if you would like, but for during the presentation portion, we do kindly ask that you stay on mute. I'm excited to share our two guest speakers with us, Dr. Derek Loftis from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science and Dr. Margie Mulholland from Old Dominion University. Derek will be discussing the data analysis side of Catch the King, and then Margie will be sharing about how you can safely dive deeper into floodwaters and help them understand water quality. So here's what our next hour together will look like. We're going to talk about Catch the King and give some introduction and table set for where we're at. Derek's going to talk about data analysis. Then Margie will have the floor, and then we'll close up with how to get involved and some tips for getting involved. So first, in case you're new to our world, Wetlands Watch is a environmental nonprofit based in Norfolk, Virginia. We work throughout the entire state, and we began as a watchdog organization, really focused on protecting wetlands from development. We've since realized that sea level rise and climate change were much larger threats to our wetlands statewide, and so we expanded our scope. And with wetlands still at the center of our work, we aim to help our communities adapt to climate change impacts like increased rainfall and sea level rise by conserving our natural resources and promoting the use of nature. And we do this by focusing on collaboration and being solutions focused. And we do this work through our 5 initiatives, and I wish I could talk about this for hours. So I do invite you to go to our website and learn more about all 5 initiatives that we currently have. Today, we're diving deep into community science and outreach efforts like Catch the King. And this year for Catch the King, if you are familiar with the program, I am now a full-time employee. I was honored to join the staff full-time October 1st last year. And I have Abby Sindelar, who is my Catch the King assistant this year. She's helping behind the scenes and during events to keep everything running smoothly. Abby was a Virginia Sea Grant intern actually last year with Measure the Muck at ODU as she finished her last year of college. And so we're really grateful to have her knowledge and have her back with us. Alrighty, so I've been throwing around the Catch the King name, but some of you might not know what king tides are. So the Science Museum created a great short clip with animations to help explain this phenomenon. And I'm going to play it here. I'm going to turn the laser pointer off of my feature off. And I believe I shared it so you can hear audio. So Genevieve, let me know if I made a fub.
Could flood our coasts. They offer a sneak peek at the permanent sea level rise climate change will bring. Tides result from the moon's gravity pulling on Earth's oceans as our planet rotates. When the sun, moon, and Earth align during a full or new moon, the sun's gravity boosts those tides. King tides occur when that alignment coincides with the moon's perigee, or when the moon is closest to Earth. These king tides often raise water levels an extra 1 to 2 feet. According to NOAA, the rate of sea level rise is increasing, and the extra foot of a king tide could become the new normal within the next 2 decades. If you live on the coast, check your local tide chart to see when the king tide will impact you. And if it's safe, you can submit flood pictures to coastal planning agencies to help researchers develop adaptation plans and protect vulnerable areas and populations.
Awesome. So the main takeaway from that amazing informative video is that king tides are normal and an expected phenomenon, and they are predictable. And we predict these tides actually years in advance. And Derek Loftis creates a tidal flooding calendar each year for our state as a resource because we are able to do this. And as mentioned in the video, we study them to help us understand what our future looks like with sea level rise. So Catch the King began in 2017. We used the Sea Level Rise app to equip individuals with tools to report and trace flooding in their neighborhoods, to give data to local decision makers, and really focused on that street level portion, not just saying, hey, this roadway is blocked, but how is it interacting on our landscape? And a really quick history about Catch the King is that our former executive director of Wetlands Watch, Skip Stiles, began app design actually in 2014 with a local app developer, and it was launched in 2015. The Catch the King event was then an idea pitched by Dave Mayfield, who was then a Virginian pilot reporter, and it was heavily supported by the pilot's top editor, Steve Gunn. And so as a result, local media outlets partnered together to spread that word and get it all out about what's going on with Catch the King. Derek Loftis, who was getting his career started at VIMS at this time, was often interviewed by Dave about his work. And he was working in this realm of coastal flooding and was in the loop about the app use and development. And so as he was using the data for his work. And so fast forward to where we are today, Catch the King data helps validate flood models and sea level rise predictions at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And our volunteers, I like to say, we're K to gray. So we are all ages. We have volunteers from all different areas in the state, from Alexandria to Virginia Beach and the Eastern Shore. And that very first year, they were so successful in spreading the good word that they were able to get a Guinness World Record for the most contributions to an environmental survey. And this is what the field looks like during king tides for volunteers. And, depending on where you're calling in from, this might be familiar to you, some of these photos and some of these places. And depending on where you plan on mapping or where you've seen this, it looks different. So we see development being completely blocked by our water. We're seeing marshes being taken over, docks and piers, neighborhoods, streets start flooding, and we really shouldn't be driving through them. Tell your neighbor, tell your friends. And then we're also seeing water come out of our stormwater drains. The places that are supposed to take water off of our streets become so inundated with water coming back up from our sea. And we're doing all this work to help us plan for the future because we all need to be able to get to work, to go to school, and get help when there's emergency. And we also want emergency response to be able to get to us. And we already have flood days for schools, and we're going to need to keep planning on these smaller scales and larger scales for what this is going to look like. And thanks also to Dr. Margie Mulholland's work with Measure the Muck, which you'll hear more about. We also know that floodwaters pose risks to human health and impacts our local water quality. And we also need to be planning to keep our people safe from this and our waterways clean. So being a Catch the King volunteer, this is a quick glimpse into what it looks like. Our volunteers go map during these peak high tides during the weekends we identify during this 2 hour window. So if high tide was at noon, we would advise you to go out and start mapping around 11 to 1 to really capture that predicted peak. Volunteers are capturing street level data and they're looking at those impacts in real time. So we're really seeing the differences between a roadway and a natural shoreline and how the water's interacting. Volunteers are prompted to take photos of flood impacts so we can see how how everything's being affected. Volunteers are also forming teams and sharing their flood experiences in their neighborhoods and with schools and with their peers. And naturally, being a Catch the King volunteer, you are able to better talk about the local climate change impacts that we're seeing and be part of those solutions. And just to highlight kind of when we talk about forming teams, we've got university students here. We have locality workers. We've got our master naturalists, and we even have families. So quite a variety of people involved. And I'm not going to talk too much about the data. Derek's going to do a lot of that, but just a quick note that when we are talking about mapping, we're talking about dropping pins. And each pin corresponds to a timestamp and a date stamp and coordinates like you would have in like for your GPS. And we also have accuracy information that is recorded. And all of this can be easily exported and put onto maps using geographic information systems. And then, for Derek, it's easily comparable to his hydrodynamic flooding model. And this is what data collection looks like in action. It really is taking a step, and every 3 to 5 steps, you are dropping pins. So we can really see what this flooding looks like. And super quickly, because I want to get to our incredible guest speakers. But in 2025, we had a great turnout of people. We had over 160 volunteers, and we dropped the most pins since 2020. So, you might notice we only had 187, or we did have 187 in 2024. So we had 20 less people, and we got 20% more data. So our volunteers are committed. They're monitoring and mapping multiple times in a weekend. And while that's not required, I think it just shows how much people are getting from this experience. And each region has really great examples of quality mapping. You can see that our pins are consistent lines, but we bring this up to talk about, there's more to good data than just the numbers and the number of pins. Our tide mappers are doing a wonderful job taking their time to produce quality, reliable spatial and temporal data. And last year, I have to mention that during Catch the King weekend, we did have a special event. We had a nor'easter on top of a king tide. These are some photos from that Sunday, October 12th. And we had about 6.18 feet of water, which for context, that means that's what our higher high tides are going to look like during a daily event in 2070. So this was definitely eye-opening to see, a great data collection opportunity, but also just great for everybody to kind of get that context. And the event is well captured in this map that we created throughout the weekend. So this snapshot right here is of the Hague in Norfolk, right outside the Chrysler Museum. The lighter yellows are Friday, our oranges are that Saturday, and then the reds are that Sunday, October 12th of Catch the King. So you can really see that volunteers are capturing this incredible variation and the influences we see on our water in their own observations. And lastly, although we don't have 700 volunteers like we did in 2017, it's incredible to see how our geographic reach has expanded. That's a big win in itself. And who knows, maybe we can do it again. And we're going to bring in Dr. Margie Mulholland from ODU.
Okay, let me get my share on. Okay, let me put that in presentation mode for you. Okay, I'm going to talk about measuring the muck while catching the king. And we've been partnering with Wetlands Watch since 2017, since they started the Catch the King, to try to look at the water quality impacts from tidal flooding. We're used to coastal flooding during storms, but now we get tidal flooding when the sky is blue, and the hours that we spend with nuisance flooding has increased over the years. This is a figure that a colleague of mine made, essentially showing the hours spent 1 foot above mean high water, which is the level in Norfolk that starts causing nuisance flooding or flooding in the streets. And so here you can see we had 9 of the last 10 years are in the top 10 for hours spent flooded. And you can see here that 2024 is still the record number of days of flooding that we've had. But this is all from Sewell's Point, and this tide gauge has been in place since 1930. So when it floods, it's inconvenient and hard to get around. As you can see here from the pictures, all the flooded cars. And on land, we're adapting. We're putting up signs, and here, let me do a laser pointer. Oops, I can't figure out where that is. Never mind. Um, yeah, so we're starting to put up signs and avoiding parking in different areas and putting meter sticks on the roadways so we don't go through it and flood our cars. And so we're adapting, oops, on land, and now it's not advancing. Okay, there we go. There we go. And here we can see we have flooded buildings and roads. We're raising houses. And most of the efforts that we've spent in recent years have been focused on the landward side and mitigating and adapting and protecting our infrastructure. But we also want to think about the water side. And for me, I was part of the Chesapeake Bay Program Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee when this program was being initiated. And I knew that anything delivered to the waterways in terms of nutrients when there was coastal flooding wasn't counting toward the regulatory actions that were being taken to help restore the bay. So the nutrient loads in particular weren't being counted toward the total maximum daily load. And why do we care about that? Well, we're trying to restore the bay. And we put the bay on a nutrient diet, but none of this nutrient that's entering the waterway during tidal flooding is counting. And nutrient over-enrichment has caused harmful algal blooms. I don't know if any of you have been on the water the last month, but we've had an extensive algal bloom of this species over here. The figure on the top right is a bloom of Margolophidium polycricoides. And this is Norfolk Yacht and Country Club, for those of you who don't know. So this is the Lafayette River. And you can see it's full of this algae that causes harmful effects, and it kills larval fish and oysters, some of the iconic species in the bay. We're also starting to get Alexandria monollatum right now in the York River, and this is a bioluminescent toxic algae that forms. And when these algae die, they create dead zones that also kill fish in addition to their toxins. So how can we hope to restore the bay if we're not counting a lot of the nutrient load that's going in? And so essentially, when it floods, almost everything on the landscape goes in. We've focused on nutrients, but there's also, you can see an oil sheen here, and that all goes in the water. Anything really on the landscape is going into the water. There's litter here, you can see. There's trash cans that are tipped over and unattended. There's a trash bag here submerged in the water. And so there's pet waste going in, and this is a manhole cover where toilet paper is coming out the top of it because of the high water. So you can see we're getting a lot of things being delivered to the waterways, and we care about the nutrient loads because we're trying to restore the bay. And we have set total maximum daily loads as the regulatory tool that the EPA sets in order to account for the nutrient load that would be allowable and cause and yeah, so essentially the nutrients delivered during tidal flooding is barrier to restoration. The other thing we've been measuring is enterococcus, which is a fecal indicator. This is essentially a fecal indicator bacteria that the Department of Health uses to test the water. And when they find levels above 104 mpn, I throw out that number because I'm going to throw out a much bigger number in just a minute. But when the Department of Health measures a level that's greater than the fishable swimmable standard, that's 104, they close beaches. And so what we're doing is measuring enterococcus in floodwaters to see if they're safe to touch, because people play in those waters and people have inadvertent contact with waters trying to get to their car or from point A to point B when it floods. So we wanted to measure the loading of these materials, and essentially we had to know a number of things. See, here's the nice, well-behaved estuarine water sitting in the estuary. Here's when there's tidal flooding, and everything from the landscape flowing in, including construction debris, trash, and all the things that I already mentioned. Why don't we know this load, and why isn't it being accounted for already? Well, it's a little tricky to calculate the load. Usually when they're setting a nutrient load for a water body, they measure a flow rate down a river. That's unidirectional flow, right? And you measure the concentration of whatever it is, the contaminant you care about, and you measure the flow rate, you multiply one by the other, and easy peasy, you have a load. But for calculating the load from tidal flooding is trickier because you have to know what was in the estuary to subtract that out. You have to have a statistically robust number of samples to estimate a concentration in the floodwater. And a really tricky part is you need to know the volume of floodwater. And what Derek's work at THIMS has allowed us to calculate that. We also need to get these floodwater samples within an hour of high tide. So we have to get them all at once from an area. So we need an army of volunteers. So what we needed to do was a little difficult. We needed to have hundreds of samples. We needed to collect these samples synoptically, and we needed to know that floodwater volume and what was in the estuary. The Lafayette River is a time series site for us for monitoring harmful algal blooms, so we know it well. So we picked that as our test bed for measuring the muck. We were able to tap into Catch the King because they already had and were advertising for a large army of volunteers. And so we actually have our volunteers catch the king while they're measuring the muck. We trained community members. These included school groups, students of all ages, other master naturalist groups, any group that wanted to do it, or any individual that wanted to do it, we would partner them with teams. But we also targeted an accessible watershed that we knew something about, like I said, the Lafayette River. So what we do is in the morning, day of the event, which is the Saturday of the Catch the King event, we arm our teams with coolers with sampling bottles. We send them out in groups so that one person can be collecting the samples, another person can be mapping, another person can be recording things. And then we have people ready to accept the samples and receive them when they bring them back to ODU, usually within an hour of high tide. And this is what the sampling kit looks like. We give you gloves because we don't want you to have contact with the water. We give you log sheets, and we'll identify an area on the map of where to go and sample. And these are just some of the areas. This is just an inundation map made with Titan, Norfolk's inundation tool. And you can see we send people out to a lot of different areas that we know that flood. What we've learned so far. We actually have 3 publications in journals, and we learned that the nutrient load is substantial. In fact, up to the entire annual load allocation can be delivered during just a couple flooding events. And we also learned that the floodwaters were loaded with Enterococcus. 80% of the floodwater samples were greater than that 104 threshold. That the upper end for the assay is 24,000 MPNs. We hit that in a number of samples. So that water is not safe to be in contact with. Okay, but people, these are photos I collected from the Virginian pilot, and you can see people are both purposely and inadvertently contacting the floodwater. And we'd rather they didn't do that. Again, like I said, we have publications now that Alfonso Macias Tapia took the lead on and did his PhD working on this. And so this is the data that volunteers collect are going to help the restoration of the bay. They're now using some of our floodwater nutrient numbers in next generation bay program models that are used to advise the restoration. So we're really happy about that. And our next steps are to try to deliver some health advisories, essentially for people because we think they shouldn't be contacting the floodwaters. And now that ODU and EVMS have merged, we're trying to involve the medical school in coming out with us and looking at pathways of potential exposures and to identify the potential health outcome comes from these exposures. And this is our flyer for this year. We'll be doing 2 Measure the Muck events, one on September 12th. They're both on the Saturdays of the King Tide weekend. And so on September 12th and October 10th. And we have 2 locations where people can pick up coolers at ODU and one at VIMS. And so, so I hope we can get some volunteers on board for this. And that's what I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Margie. And I'll be sharing.
Awesome.
Whoops, there we go. Derek, are you there?
I'm here. Sorry about that. My
No,
earbuds are apparently not working right.
no worries. Well, I'll share your slides in one second. I will be sharing a um link to the interest form, and that is both the interest form for Catch the King and for Measure the Muck. So you'll be able to participate in both. And Derek, I'm getting your slides up.
Awesome.
You sound
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your help in running the
way
slides today.
better. Of course. All right, you
Sorry
are
about
up.
that. Awesome. If you go to the next slide, please. So, Catch the King, we've been really excited about the participation that's been involved so far. Stephanie's covered a lot of the details, but essentially, we've got over 3,000 unique volunteers for the last decade that have helped us collect over 250,000 GPS reported high water marks through the Sea Level Rise app. We also, in the past, have used the Esri Reporter app. It used to be called the Crowdsource app. That's an alternative that you could also use if for some reason the app is not working for you. We have an interactive map that people can enter data for. Occasionally, bugs happen, but Stephanie and the team at Open Health Innovations has really been working hard to try and get this cross-platform, of course, keeping it live on Google Play along with the iOS store. And it's been really exciting to see what we've been able to collect so far. Next slide. So ultimately, this is a drone video of myself along with my student Nina Jones, kind of identifying different places where inundation is happening. Stephanie did a great job kind of outlining how volunteers collect these types of data. And we use them to help validate the flood predictions produced by the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences Tide Watch map. Catch the King ultimately holds a Guinness World Record for the world's largest environmental survey. Specifically, the name of the title is Most Contributions to an Environmental Survey, and we collected nearly 60,000 high water marks within a 6-hour period during a single king tide on November 5th, 2017. Next slide, please. Now, last year's data, just to give you kind of an idea of the scope and the scale for this, Stephanie kind of had shared we're now to pre-pandemic numbers, which is exciting. Ultimately and intentionally, we didn't try and recruit a lot of new volunteers during the pandemic due to the fact that we wanted to ensure that all of our volunteers were safe while we were trying to offer training events to help train all of our many talented volunteers. But GPS points are not the only data point and format that we collect. We also have photographs that are really useful for helping us identify the inundation and the relative extent from a side view. Next slide, please. So while we collected 27,000 GPS reported high water marks, we do ultimately collect a variety of different data formats, and we're excited to return to revisit how these photographs are being used. And after this year's Catch the King, they've returned to adding a lot of additional metadata that are helpful for us with photographs, like directional facing when you're taking the photograph. So it now tells us, for example, you're facing at 271 degrees if 0 is due north. And so those types of things are also helpful for us to know. Not only is it tethered to that X and Y GPS pin, but we now know directional facing for those photographs that provide additional context when we compare them with our three-dimensional hydrodynamic models. And so, yes, over the last decade or so, since Catch the King began, but even the prior years, as Stephanie mentioned, when the app was in alpha and beta, you can see the massive jump in volunteers participation. If you tap again, you'll see those numbers highlighted for 2017. That's the year we won the Guinness World Record. And we've been really excited about how much data we've continued to collect since then, and ultimately how far geographically we've expanded since then. Next slide, please. Another thing that's really useful is we've been able to collect a lot of data at different locations, and that helps us cite new water level sensors. If you tab forward, it will actually highlight and show where that sensor is, or zoom in. And tap again one more time, please. And it'll kind of highlight that's a water level sensor with its own independent solar panel and independent power supply. And this is a sensor that one of our volunteers actually snapped a photo of and shared it via our Help Catch the King Tide Facebook group, which has over 1,000 volunteers directly connected to that. So if for some reason the app isn't able to record the images that you're uploading, or if you just want to share them through our social media channels instead, they're also useful, and we do see them, and we save them and include them in cool presentations like this. Next slide, please. Now, of course, the benefit behind this is that when we add these autonomous instrumentation, they can map when the inundation is happening throughout the year rather than just during individual snapshots that we had the privilege of collecting during the high tide events. And so we integrate these into the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences Tide Watch model that helps us predict up to 36 hours in advance where the inundation is happening. So these are some examples on opposite faces or banks of the James River. So in Fort Monroe, there's a U.S. Geological Survey gate gauge. And on the south end, there's a Sewell's Point gauge. And we have many water level sensors throughout the state that the federal government has deployed, but also VIMS through the Storm Sense program has collaborated with localities like the city of Virginia Beach, city of Newport News, Norfolk, for example, where we've deployed many new water level sensors specifically based on the individual locations mapped by our King Tide volunteers. Next slide, please. And so the value behind all of this, of course, is that we feed these into dashboards and we share these data publicly with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, or VDEM, their Virginia Flood Map application. And so ultimately, VFMS has these data for a lot of these locations that are integrated within this system, but also we're continuing to deploy new gauges all the time. So you can access these data through the StormSense webpage there at the top URL, or through the city of Virginia Beach, which graciously hosts this data portal through the bottom link. And so you can interact with a lot of the different water level sensors and see live observations. A lot of the localities are also tethering these to automated alerts that tell you when the inundation is happening and where. Now, the Tide Watch map is a geospatial mapping platform, and this is what you're validating through Catch the King. The QR code there at the bottom will tell you more about Catch the King and this interactive map. Ultimately, it does this to predict flooding up to 36 hours in advance, and to drive that model, we use data from the National Weather Service. Next slide, please. Now, the value, of course, behind all of this is that we are able to zoom in up to the street scale. In some cases, this is close to 1 meter or 3-foot spatial resolution based on the LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, from aerial or aircraft surveys. And so the Hampton Roads region has new LiDAR from 2024 that we've embedded directly into this grid. And this model updates twice daily at noon and midnight. Next slide, please. Now, as we're kind of trying to identify where all these places are happening, it's worth acknowledging some of the computational benchmarks. It takes it about an hour and a half to run a 36-hour forecast. And the goal behind all of this, of course, is that we're trying to map where the inundation is happening in real time. And the next generation of this model is incorporating rainfall along with subsurface infiltration along different types of impervious surfaces. Next slide, please. Now, some examples from last year, since we haven't had, thankfully, any major storm events to report on yet. Skip Styles was kind enough to share some of these data along with 13 News Now, where there was inundation that was happening in different parts of Norfolk based on last year's 2025 Hurricane Erin that kind of glanced the U.S. East Coast. It still causes flooding in a lot of the usual places like Llewellyn Avenue that Stephanie showcased earlier. You can pretty much set your clock to when the tides will flood this area, but the tides get worse when wind drives the waters into these estuarine river systems. And so as a result, we use these types of data to help us validate our model. So in conclusion, who's using Catch the King's data? Over the last decade, Virginia Institute of Marine Science has used it to improve our hydrodynamic models via hydrologic correction. What that means is, as you're kind of seeing here on the right, there's a bridge that's blocking flooding on one side of the bridge versus the other side of the bridge. But thankfully, one of our volunteers has mapped all these points on the other side of the bridge. And so from an aerial perspective, a bridge looks like a digital dam when you're translating that into a model, and we need to remove that dam because water is flowing to the other side of that bridge. Obviously, we know that, but our models don't always know that. And so as we're trying to correct the elevation assumptions, we call this hydrologic correction. And the benefit behind this particular thing that Catch the King has helped us with is that normally people improve models after a major storm event, like a devastating hurricane or nor'easter. But by mapping each year's king tide, this helps us correct these things during low stakes flooding events rather than truly devastating events like a nor'easter or hurricane when it would really matter. That way, our model is more likely to be accurate when it's truly important. The second step here, of course, is that we're also working with the Mid-Atlantic Regional Association for Coastal Ocean Observing Systems, or MARICOS, to help deploy more water level sensor in places where the king tide has been influencing flood conditions at places that typically are not inundated. We use those based on your GPS data. And then finally, VIMS validates the Tide Watch forecasts using these models to build new data products. So these points by themselves are going to become their own data products through interactive rasters. And that's fancy jargon to basically say we can produce a continuous maps from your discrete points that are clumped in different areas and public properties to estimate throughout Chesapeake Bay where the inundation is happening. regardless of whether anyone has collected data there, based on the contours and the elevations derived from them. Now, the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission is also using CTK data. And in this particular case, it's really useful because they've also deployed water level sensors in roadways that are frequently inundated and corroborating those data with municipal flood reports. The Hampton Roads Sanitation District is also overlaying the Catch the King data with flood observations. And this helps them better identify where the sewer collection networks might be adversely affected by salt water entering those systems and ultimately disrupting nutrient removal processes at treatment plants.
All right, y'all, we have a few more slides to go, and then we will have some question and answer time. All right. As I'm going to go through these slides a little quickly, I want to let you all know that this is being recorded and we will share the recording with you. But I had a few things I wanted to make you aware of how to get involved in Catch the King and Measure the Muck. So first thing is to make sure you save the dates. These are all on our homepage. We have opened up more opportunities for mapping this year. Typically, we've had for the past few years a wet run. So this is a data collection event while practicing and getting some of the bugs out of our app. And then we have the official Catch the King event. This year, it's October 9th through 11th. We have opened some full moon mapping though at the end of the months, as we are predicted to have some higher tides then. And we have volunteers who are super eager and ready to keep going. And so we are trying to have the most people for the October weekend, but we will take mapping whenever we can. And here is that interest form. I think Genevieve put it in the chat. This is for Measure the Muck and Catch the King. So you can scan the QR code, follow the link. And one thing that, Derek and I had chatted about in the spring is we wanted to, kind of stomp this idea that you can't duplicate efforts. It's actually helpful to invite your friends to map with you and for all of you to use your own devices at the same time, not just for safety to make sure no one gets swept away or has a medical emergency and no one can get to them from floodwaters, but also for science. So having this type of side-by-side mapping with other people helps improve the credibility of the data. If you've ever done water quality sampling or monitoring, they'll tell you to get replicates. It's kind of a similar idea. The more you have, the more you can say this is probably correct. Also, repeated mapping over multiple days in the same spot, super helpful. As you saw with that 2025 variations map, we're able to capture quite the variation. And after filling out the interest form, it's important for you to get to know the app before the day of mapping. You can do this by either self-training. We have a step-by-step tutorial guide available online. There's also a recording of a training from last year that I'm hoping to update, but both of those together will get you onto the app and get you all of that information. And you can supplement that with office hours. Every Wednesday from 12 to 1, I'm on Zoom ready to answer your questions. Or you can attend a training event in person. And we have a calendar online. I'm going to share links as we keep going of where you can find training events. But while we're talking about the app, oh my gosh, not a nap, I wanted to give a quick few notes. You are welcome to scan this QR code and download the app now, or check if there's an update available for you. But I'm going to keep going as a warning to give you a few tips to get started. So after you scan it, you might want to put your phone down just for a minute. All right, I'm gonna keep going. So when you're joining the app, one thing that you need to know is that you have to verify your account via email before logging in for the first time. So if you create an account and then immediately try to log in, it won't let you in because you need to verify your account. You want to check your inbox for an email from searisingsolutions.com and you'll click on a link. It'll validate it. You'll go back to the app and then log in. If you are not getting this email, check your spam folder. If you're still having issues, let us know at catchtheking@wetlandswatch.org and we can help verify on the back end. The other thing to know about the Sea Level Rise app is it is an incredible tool, but it's also an open tool. So you might notice that on this map that says official and all. You want to be at the official part of the Discover part of the app. You want to be looking at the official Catch the King events. If you select all, you'll see events that everybody has made over the years as we've been trying to get to know the app. But unfortunately, we aren't tracking data in those areas. So, in short, do not tap the plus button that would be down here unless you want to create a region for your own purpose. Will not be able to track the data in a region you create. So make sure you are in official regions. When we take photos, it's important to do it down a flooded edge rather than at the flood or the shoreline. This is a beautiful sunset photo, but this is much more helpful for us to see. And Derek can actually use the photos, like you mentioned, for validation. There's some things in the photos he can say, hey, I know how big that is, and it helps him even more. When you also are capturing a photo or adding a note, you must drop a pin to submit those. That is like the one thing that if you take away from this, I want you to remember. You have to drop a pin after you add a note or take a photo. Think of it as your submit button. That also means you need to stay in the spot that you wrote that note for or took that photo from. Cool. And I know I'm going quick. Again, this is recorded, written down. If your GPS signal strength in the Tools tab goes below 70%, you can use the trouble spots function in the app to drop a singular pin for general location to indicate there's flooding present. We encourage you to take a lot of photos and notes and share them with us. You can also conduct a site cleanup. September 12th is actually like International Coastal Cleanup Day. It's important to be cleaning up our waters, especially as it takes everything with it. And we encourage you to share your experience on social media. Advocacy is such a big part of this work. And you can share your flood story with Virginia's Department of Conservation and Recreation as they work on our flood resilience master plan for the state. And the gist of this slide is please be safe. Please protect yourself, your property. Don't map in dangerous situations or questionable spots. Make sure you get permission for private property. Make sure your littles are being supervised. And just remember that your safety goes first and foremost. I love science, but I like you more, I think. All right, reporting issues in the app. We know things happen and we appreciate your patience as always. We are doing everything that we can to make this a useful tool. So in the app this year, there is a way where you can contact the developers directly. This is helpful if you definitely think it's an app issue. We encourage you to use this. It'll allow you to add a description and attach screenshots of the issue. That is super helpful. The more detailed you're able to get, the better we can fix it. If you think it's user error, that's all good. It happens. Just email the Catch the King coordinator and we'll get you set straight. All right, I've mentioned some resources. So the Catch the King toolkit, it's linked on our homepage. This is your one-stop shop for all resources. We've got training guides and videos. We have resources for how to read tide charts and find tide predictions for your area. We have guidance for mapping locations and answers to kind of any question you might have. And real quick, when it comes to mapping, you are welcome to create your own plan and collect data at where it makes sense for you. While we do have some places we know we might need data, we also, at the end of the day, want it to be something that is fun for you, engaging for you, and accessible for you. I mentioned events coming up and the events calendar. So we do have this calendar linked on the homepage for Catch the King that will tell you and be updated for trainings, mapping information, how to get to office hours. And reminder, office hours Wednesday, Zoom, noon. I'll see you there. And while I'm talking about some trainings, we do have a Tide Captain training coming up on September 1st. These are our leaders who help train others and spread the word and help their local mappers. And so if you're interested, you are very much welcome to join. We also have a training coming up in Chesapeake during Eco Fest at the library. And we have one coming up in Newport News in collaboration with the city. And we have other ones hopefully coming up. I've got some things in the mix, but if you want to co-host a Catch the King training, please let me know. We just need a space and we'll get the energy together and we'll make it happen. But we're looking for people to help bring people together and provide that space. All right, home stretch, then we're done. The Catch the King newsletter, you are automatically signed up when you sign up for a training or if you fill out the interest form. This is the best way to get all the information that you need about Catch the King. And if you fill out the interest form, you're going to get more direct information when it matters the most. As Derek mentioned, you can connect with other mappers on Facebook. We have our Facebook page. And then before Catch the King, these are kind of your steps that we mentioned. You want to do the interest form. You want to get to know the app and make sure you're set up in all of your regions and events. You want to practice in the app. You want to make sure you've checked out all the resources on the toolkit and then help spread the word. Invite your friends. And back again this year, opening soon, is our arts contest, the Tides of Tomorrow, Jane Brinkley Thumb Memorial Arts Contest. It is visual arts for high school students this year. Tentatively, submissions will be due February 15th, and there's more information about that on our website. And we're looking for sponsors. If you'd like to sponsor Catch the King, there's also a web page for that. We'd love to have your support. And it's time for questions. And I want to say before questions, thank you to all of our current sponsors, all of our partners, and my coordination team who helped make this possible. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. All right, Genevieve, where are we at with questions in the chat?
Oh my gosh, I did a no, muted myself. None so far on questions. Come on, everybody.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah, and I see you've been popping in. Thank you.
I'm gonna repost all the links in one spot, everybody, but I thought I would post them through. And yeah, as a reminder, our YouTube page is there.
Yes. And this video will be up on the YouTube and I will email it out. But if you have questions for Derek, for Margie, or myself while we're here, the next few minutes are open up.
So we just got a question from George Jackson on how does this work for non-tidal waters?
So
Ooh,
that's a great question. Ultimately, as we kind of look at this, we've been focusing mainly on the coastal zone. I saw Genevieve answered the question earlier about, like areas in the river and valley, parts of Virginia, and mountain regions as well. Obviously, Catch the King is focused on king tides, but in this case, we do model in some of those other areas. And as Stephanie pointed out, ultimately, you're not going to be collecting data in the king tide regions for that, but there are other places in the app that you can record data just like you would for Catch the King in regions or events that you set up yourself. If you'd like more information about that, please email us because we do have people that will collect in non-tidal areas, although it is slightly outside the scope for Catch the King. We're certainly thrilled if we have any volunteers that are interested in that.
yeah, thank you, Derek. And, Catch the King and the Sea Level Rise app, definitely. Things are expanding, thoughts are on the horizon. So stay tuned about more opportunities when it comes to just keeping an eye on our waters. Wink, wink, that might be like rainfall flood monitoring. No promises, but these are ideas.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just updated my app and I'm looking at it. And when I call up my regions, I get about 20 test regions set on here.
Oh, Ray, you are a special winner of the most recent bug that we found. Congratulations.
Okay.
I am going to, our app developers are aware that that's an issue for some of our returning mappers. They're currently working on it, but I'm going to send them a message that we have a third. You are the third person who's told me. So I will let them know that there's a third person and I'll give them your account, email so that they can make sure it's addressed. So
Yeah. I was,
Stephanie Angela Wilson said she is having this a similar issue.
awesome. Y'all are winners. That's what it means. It means that you have caught the king so much that the king is starting to catch you. That's what it means. But in all seriousness, thank you guys. These are really helpful, and I will let them know we have additional ones.
Stephanie, are the Measure the Muck kits only available South Side?
Ooh, Margie, I'll let you
I
pop in
I
here.
was just answering that in the chat, is we have sites
Oh,
both at VIMS and at ODU.
And if
So it'll be at Davis Hall at VIMS at 9:30 on September 12th, we'll assemble, and at ODU as well in the Ocean and Physics building. And then on Saturday, October 10th, I put September for both of them. October 10th, the high tide is around 10, so we'll assemble around 8:30 at both the places again.
And if you do need the kit beforehand, if you would like to only drive the one way, feel free to email the Catch the King email and Margie and I can work with you to see what is possible.
Right, because we do every now and then give someone a kit, the night before if they can't come in the morning, especially if they're experienced sampler, or we can show you it's not rocket science, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But but it but we do want them back within an hour of sample collection because we need to stabilize the samples before we analyze them, and the Enterococcus samples actually have to be run right away. And actually, this year we're doing Vibrio as well. I saw Angela was on the call. So we're really excited that we'll be identifying what Vibrio species, and many of them are pathogenic, are in the floodwater, as well as how many of them.
very exciting.
Uh,
We also have a question about getting in contact with public schools and how they can be connected in environmental clubs so that kids can get on the hands-on experience.
Yes. So we would love to connect more with schools. We actually just did a webinar on Monday. Was that Monday or Tuesday? That was
Yeah,
Tuesday.
it was one of those days.
It was one of those days. Margie and I have seen
I
each
think
other
it
a
was
lot.
Tuesday. We've seen a lot of each other this week.
About how it can be worked into the classroom and into those clubs. And we're happy to provide some training, whether virtually, or in person to, get your students involved. And
Yeah, we
we'll,
also did a training Wednesday at Deep Creek for some of the students there. And I've reached out to Maury High School as well because they've come out with us as well in previous years. But we welcome more school kids.
yes. Dave, I saw your note. I'm so sorry your app's disappeared. I'd say try downloading it again. And then if that's not working, you can come by the office and we can work on it together.
okay. All right. Sounds like a plan.
I'm so
It doesn't
sorry.
like me anymore.
You've been kicked out of the king.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, we have one more minute left, for any questions. Oh, October 10th, you will be meeting, for Measure the Muck. You're meeting at ODU this year.
Yeah, we did it at ERP in previous years because there was a home football game. And so all the parking lots were being used for tailgaters.
Hmm.
Oh, that is a great question, Douglas. We have one more. How do we find out where volunteers are needed?
Ooh, I love that question. You can email the Catch the King email with kind of where you're located, and that's something that I have not yet collated a list from Derek and our other partners, but I'll have a list of potential priorities.
That's right, Stephanie. We're looking at the gaps analysis right now to identify where in our awesome culminating map of all the years, where are there still data gaps where there also exist public properties to map.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Derek. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Oh, I see we have one last question. The dates for the full moon sampling in
Can
October.
always consult the calendar for that.
Yes, the calendar is a great spot, our homepage, and I don't have them memorized, but I'm bringing them up. Uh,
I see that last week of October.
there we go.
Yep.
25th to 30th. Yep, there we go. October full moon mapping. So pre-Halloween, king tides are scary. We'll talk about it. We'll make posts about it.
Hey,
Alrighty,
hey,
y'all.
Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie. Uh,
Yes.
Gary
Gary,
Harris.
hi.
Hey. So in Portsmouth, we're working to get those numbers up in terms of volunteers and mappers, etc. We are planning a series of activities around the Catch the Key Tide event. First off, we're planning a Just Science Festival. It's going to be larger this year because we got some more sponsors and partners, etc., to really make that happen. Next, we just had some events here locally that woke us up in terms of heavy precipitation and its impact on communities. So we're going to have a community dialogue and preparedness and capacity building workshop right there as well, where we're taking data. Uh, and besides that, we're going to do a rally for resilience. This is where we're going to have again a number of tables and displays, etc., all about folks being prepared to make their communities more resilient. We're going to hand out resources, knowledge exchange, etc. So come on down to City Park in Portsmouth. We're going to get those numbers up this year and make it happen. Okay, and that's going to
Aw-
be on the 10th.
Awesome, Gary. Thank you. And let us know what you need support-wise. You heard that, y'all. Portsmouth, it's coming for the title. It's
That's
coming
right.
for the Catch the King titles.
That's right.
All
Rocky.
right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this
Thanks,
afternoon,
Ray.
and I hope to see you soon. And thank you for your support and involvement. And I'll be here if there's any lingering questions. Thank you.
Thank you.